Hey folks, and welcome back to another small peek of our tested production environment. For this video, I'm going to be talking about the lighting rigs that we use on our tested studio sets, and then focusing a bit on one of my favorite LED lights I've been using this year, the Aputure 120D Lightstorm. So a few years back, I gave you guys like a walking tour of our tested studio space. That was our old office. We're using a combination of KinoFlows and Aries to kind of illuminate that set. And since then, we've moved offices to a whole new studio space, a whole different environment, and we've kind of had to bring all of those lights over to this new space and set up a whole new lighting rig. So before we dive into this LED light, I kind of just wanted to give you guys an updated look at what we're doing with our studio space now and kind of what we plan on doing in the future. So I will throw this over to me to give you guys a brief look at that new studio space. All right, so this is our tested live studio set. You've seen this in like product reviews and tons of live mixes. So let's move backwards. So in this room has two big windows. You have this giant window here, but the sun doesn't come in directly. So that's just providing a little bit of ambient light during the daytime. And that's, we don't really need to worry about that changing the situation too much because it's very small changes during the day that the lighting doesn't really affect the set too much. Our biggest concern was the skylight. Now there's a massive skylight there, and that, if you've seen our one-day build videos at Adam's Cave, you'll see that the lighting changes dramatically throughout the day, and like it gets this harsh light coming down and provides like these raccoon eyes. So we needed to control that because that just goes too crazy. So Ryan Kaiser, our production manager here, installed this skylight that just kind of covers it and lets off a little bit of light leakage off the sides, but that doesn't come down to the set. So that's perfect. We close that up when we shoot, and we rely on the lights here. Now I set this trussing rig up, and this whole thing is, there's some Mayfer clamps and just some mounting rigs, but we have all of our KinoFlows, our fluorescent lights that you've seen in our past videos. We got some 4 banks here, a big old double bank, and those are all set to daylight, and those are providing basically like a nice, even, flat illumination right here in the foreground. This is just kind of blowing light all over this front set. So if we have 4 people here, all building something, they'll all get enough light from this stuff. So above those, we have some Aries clamped to the top. These are Aries 300s, and where the KinoFlows are all daylight balanced, those tungstens are much warmer. So those are like a 3200 Kelvin, where the daylight's like 56. So in front of those, if you look at the lighting modifiers in front of those are these gels. These are called CTBs. These are half CTBs, color temperature blues. And those are actually changing the light temperature from that light to make it closer to daylight. Now these are half, so these are basically bringing it halfway towards daylight. And that's fine, because we're actually shooting back towards this blue wall, and that's what's giving these shadows here and this light here. Now it's giving it like a little bit of an orange color along that blue wall. Which is great, and it's also providing these hard shadows, which is much different than our foreground. Here we don't want these hard shadows, we want soft shadows on our subjects. But the background of the set was designed in a way where we're using a lot of shapes and geometry, and these shelves that represents this kind of maze is actually pushed off against the wall. And we're using that to add depth to the set here. We're using that, and we're using the shadows and the hard light. So if you look at this from an angle, from straight on, you'll see like the front edges here of the wooden panel is kind of much brighter on the value scale, and then you get a little bit more of like a mid-tone on the sides, and then underneath you get your lows, and then same with the background here. You have your hotter spots, and then your real dark spots here, and all that. When you look at it on camera, it really starts to add some depth. So we're doing that with lighting, married with the design of the whole set. Now here you'll see an Aries 150, and this actually doesn't have any gel on it. So this is pure tungsten. You can see that it's super warm compared to like the daylight. Our camera here is set to daylight, so it should look normal when I'm standing up in front, but back here you'll see that it's actually adding quite a bit of color to this blue wall. So up here as our rim light for our subjects, we have an Aries 650 that's quite heavily modified. Now we have the black wrap wrapped around that light, and that's this kind of heat-proof aluminum wrapping that's helping prevent spill from the rest of the set. So that's controlling the spill of the light. In front of that, we have like a white diffusion that's softening the light. And then in front of that, we have a full CTB that's bringing that entire thing down to daylight. So we have that rim light hitting the back of me, daylight, and then the front daylight. So everything's kind of evened out, and then those warmer lights are hitting the background. So there you have it. That's kind of what we're working with now in our new studio set. Those Kino flows, those Aries that we're using, they're probably a bit dated now as far as like technologies go, those specific products. But that's fine. It still, it still works. It's still illuminating our set just fine. But as I was mentioning, LED lights are becoming a much larger powerhouse as far as lighting technologies go for lots of studio sets, feature films, just you name it. The video industry is kind of utilizing a lot more LED lights. So let's hone in on the one I mentioned here, the Aputure 120D Lightstorm. This is a daylight version of the Aputure 120. They also have a tungsten version, but we use a lot of daylight at our studio set, so I chose to opt for the daylight version. So if you follow any like filmmaking YouTube channels, you've probably seen this light. A lot of people are using it for good reason. It's very versatile. There's a whole bunch of great qualities about it, and we'll get into why we've been using it and what we've been using it for specifically. But let's just kind of take a look at what this LED light is, because I think one of the most interesting things about it is that it is a single source LED light. Now, technically, it's like a million microscopic LED lights that are all kind of working together to create one source. But for all intents and purposes, it is a single source LED light. Now, if you've seen me talk about LEDs before, you know I'm not a huge fan of the like the arrays, just the grid of a bunch of different little sources. Those usually create kind of chunky shadows, and you have to use a lot of light modifiers to diffuse that and get rid of that and turn it more into a single source. But a lot of times those aren't powerful enough, and at that point you're kind of losing a lot of light, and for shooting video, it gets a little tricky. So this is a single light source, and it's relatively small, and it's meant to be modified with light modifiers. But modifying is actually okay because this light gets really freaking bright. It is essentially like a 1K. I've heard people say it's equivalent to like a 1K tungsten like Arri. But as far as like all of our lights in our studios go, this is probably the most powerful. It's the smallest and most powerful. So let's quickly just go over the specs real quick before we get into what we've been using it for. Even though this light is extremely powerful and bright, it's only using like 135 watts of power. Now you can either just plug it in. Here's like the main block. You can plug your power into the wall, or you can power it using like V-Lock batteries, or we use V-Lock batteries. I think you can get this with like a gold mount plate if you use Anton Bauer gold mount batteries, but essentially you just lock this guy in and you have your controls here on the block, the power and the dimming and the grouping, or you can use the controller that comes with it and remotely turn these lights on, dim them, or kind of group them all together so that you can set up different groups, so you can just hit one button, they all turn on or all dim together. Now this light runs at a 96 CRI as far as light quality goes. CRI is the color rendering index, and that's kind of getting pretty deep into light measuring stuff. But essentially what that means is it's a scale from 0 to 100 on how light accurately portrays color. So the sun would be like 100, and household lights kind of range from mid 50s to 80s. Most film lights you want like in the 80 to 100 range. This is 96, and it stays at 96 the entire dimmable range. Some lights will actually drop in quality as you start to dim them or change the color temperature. This light has a consistent 96 CRI, which is fantastic. Now, like I mentioned before, this light is meant to be modified, not only because of the type of light and the quality, but because of the design. If you see at the end here, there's this bracket, and that bracket will allow you to mix and match different accessories that Aputure sells that change the light performance of their light using modifiers. Now, my favorite has to be the light dome. This is this large diffused dome that gives off like a 35-inch soft light source. I've used this a bunch for our build videos. I'll throw the light onto an end of a C-stand and kind of put it above center of the entire workspace, and it just gives off this soft light over the entire point of interest, which is oftentimes the big desk, and then gives like a nice glamorous just light for our talent or the people that are participating in the build. I also use this light modifier for talking videos like this one. Right now, because the light's here, I have a Kino flow here, lighting me as the main key, and then a bead board over here, kind of giving me a fill. But for most of the time, I'll take the light dome, put it pretty close to me, and let the light kind of wrap around me and create a nice dimension with very soft shadows. And actually for the Arctic video that I did last year, I used it as like a main key on my short side, and then filled the rest of the set with like practicals and stuff. So while this light is a really good area light, it also is really good with these one-on-one videos, which is probably why you see this popular amongst many other YouTubers. It's a really easy light to set up, and you get a great quality out of that light. The dome itself does collapse down into a little bag, but it's kind of a pain in the ass to strike it and bring it back up. Usually I just carry it around with me. I'll throw it into our truck or car for locations. And while it's relatively small for like industry standards, it's still kind of big for some of the smaller spaces that we shoot in. If that's the case, then I'll just take the light dome off and I'll just use that raw light and maybe push it up and shoot it at the ceiling to use that as a light source and kind of bounce the light around that way. You know, going from the light dome to this little tiny device is kind of nice because it's very portable that way. So the next light modifier we've been using is the Fresnel lens. Now this is a Fresnel lens like you would find in any other Fresnel light like the Aries. It's a light that is made up of concentric circles that help shape the light into something a little more even with this really nice fall off around the edges. We've been using this light again when space is a little tight and we can't bring the light dome. I'll bring this light, maybe bounce off a beadboard or a reflector. You can use it as like a background light and kind of spot things, or use it at the ceiling, bounce that. If there are scrims on location, sometimes I'll throw up a scrim and shoot through that to diffuse it a bit and give it a nice larger, softer light source. It's a really versatile light, especially when you start using it with secondary modifiers like those scrims or beadboards. This is probably my second favorite out of the light modifiers. It's very versatile in what you can do with it. And if you need to spot or flood this light more, you just adjust the distance of the Fresnel lens from the light source and you can have that kind of granular control over the light. So that is how we have been using the 120D. This light has been a joy to work with. I kind of love it. It's been easy to travel with, easy to set up. I will probably be upgrading to the 300D, which has just come out. This light, if you say it's like equivalent of a 1K, that light is like the equivalent of a 2K. I saw it at NAB earlier this year, boomed out with a cylindrical area light modifier, kind of hung around, giving off just an insane amount of light while drawing very little power. And as we start approaching how to upgrade our tested studio lighting rigs, that is something to look at for us, because right now we are drawing a lot of power with power kind of routed all over the office because we trip breakers drawing that much stuff. These lights we can set up with LED lights in general. We can just set up a lot more light now with a lot less power and a lot more control, honestly. So that is going to be an exciting time to look forward to. Once we start remaking our lighting schematic in the studio, I'll do a whole updated video and show you guys what we've done differently and what we plan on doing for future lighting rigs in our office. That's it. LED lights, it's a very exciting time for them if you are excited by light the way I am. There's a lot of great stuff coming out, a lot of really interesting tech that's being implemented in this stuff. Really cool. Thank you guys for bearing with me and watching this video on lights and specifically the 120D. And we will see you guys next time on one of these tested production behind the scenes videos. Thank you guys. Bye.